5,000 years ago, humanity attempted something it had never tried before, living together in an organized society. Between two unpredictable rivers, scattered communities became cities, strangers became citizens, and civilization itself began to take shape. This land would become to be known as Mesopotamia. Between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers lay a unique environment known as the Fertile Crescent of the ancient Near East, a land that would shape the course of human history. The same rivers that gave life to the land also yielded unpredictable results, flooding without warning and forcing early communities to adapt or perish. To survive, humans would have to do something new. They would have to organize and cooperate to build a plan for the future. Along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, communities engineered canals, levees, and irrigation systems, transforming unpredictable floods into a controlled source of life. The expansion of irrigation agriculture and long distance trade created administrative demands that oral tradition could no longer sustain. Out of this administrative necessity, writing developed as a tool of governance, record keeping, and economic management. At first, writing was not created for stories or literature, but for survival. Early scribes pressed simple symbols into wet clay tablets to record grain harvest, trade transactions, and temple resources. Over time, these symbols evolved into cuneiform, one of the world's first writing systems. Order created opportunity. Freed from constant survival, individuals could specialize in building, trading, recording, and governing, forming the first truly urban societies. In cities like Uruk and Babylon, humanity began to experience something entirely new: structured civic life. Religious institutions played a central role in urban governance. Temples functioned not only as sacred spaces, but as administrative centers controlling land, labor, and surplus resources. This fusion of religion and governance laid the foundation for early kingship. In Mesopotamia, power was never purely human. It was believed to descend from the gods themselves. Civilizations required order, and order required authority, a responsibility increasingly placed in the hands of kings. Among the most influential of these rulers was Hammurabi of Babylon, a king who sought to bring unity and stability into a fragmented land. Hammurabi understood that conquest alone could not sustain a kingdom. Lasting stability required laws that applied to all people. Around 1754 BC, Hammurabi ordered his laws to be carved into stone, creating one of the earliest and most complete legal codes in human history. With Hammurabi's code, power began to shift from the ruler's voice to the authority of written law, a transformation that would shape civilization for millennia. As order took root, Mesopotamian cities expanded rapidly, becoming hubs of trade. With growth came new roles such as record keepers, architects, artisans, administrators, shaping the first truly specialized societies. Stability allowed knowledge to flourish. Writing, once developed for administrative survival, evolved into a system capable of preserving law, religion, mathematics, and even memory itself. Early scribes pressed wedge-shaped symbols into clay tablets using reed styluses. Over time, these pictographs developed into cuneiform, one of the world's first writing systems. What began as a method for tracking grain and trade became a medium recording legal codes, religious hymns, and epic poetry. Mesopotamian scholars also developed sophisticated mathematical systems, including a base 60 numerical structure that still shapes the modern world: 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. Their observations of the heavens produced organized calendars, blending astronomy with religious beliefs as they sought to understand the patterns of the gods. These intellectual achievements did not remain abstract. Across Mesopotamia, they rose physically into the skyline. As knowledge expanded, Mesopotamian societies gave their beliefs physical form in monumental temples known as ziggurats, rising step by step towards the sky. These structures embodied the union of religion, governance, and intellectual order. Within them, priests managed resources, recorded transactions, and performed rituals that linked earthly authority with divine will. The ziggurat revealed how early civilizations understood power, not as purely human, but as something granted by the gods themselves. From this union of sacred authority and civic administration emerged a new figure: the king. To the people of Mesopotamia, the king represented the meeting point of divine will and earthly governance, a ruler whose authority was thought to originate with the gods. If the king embodied divine authority, that authority now needed definition, structure, and permanence. In Babylon, this need found its most enduring expression under a ruler named Hammurabi. Hammurabi understood that conquest could unify territory, but only law could unify society. Around 1754 BC, he commissioned a comprehensive legal code, inscribing it in the stone, so that authority would no longer rest solely in the voice of the king, but in publicly defined law. The code did not merely punish wrongdoing, it organized society itself. It established rules for merchants and farmers, protections for property, obligation within family, and standards for judges. For the first time on such a scale, law became a visible structure, an attempt to design fairness into civilization, rather than leave order to memory or power alone. With law fixed in stone, civilization gained something new: continuity. Authority could now outlast the voice of a single ruler, preserved in writing and applied across generations. Order was no longer dependent on memory or tradition alone, but anchored in recorded principle. The principle that authority could be written, preserved, and enforced would echo far beyond Babylon. Future empires would expand this model, building upon the foundation that law could stand above the ruler. With order preserved in writing, societies gained the capacity to scale. Governance became transferable, repeatable, and enforceable across regions. The foundations of empire had been laid, awaiting rulers capable of wielding them. In northern Mesopotamia, a new kind of power would rise: Assyria. Feared for its military might, it was equally remarkable for its administrative sophistication. The same civilizations capable of ruthless conquest was also capable of preserving knowledge, demonstrating that empire required not only force but structure. The Assyrians understood that dominance required more than victory. Authority had to be managed, recorded, and communicated. Provincial governors enforced royal policy, scribes documented resources and populations, and networks of roads unified distant territories into a single political system. Empire became an exercise in information as much as power, a civilization governed through knowledge as well as strength. The same empire, feared for its brutality, would become a guardian of memory. In Nineveh, King Ashurbanipal assembled thousands of clay tablets, myths, laws, scientific observations, preserving the intellectual inheritance of Mesopotamia, even as an Assyrian armies reshaped its political landscapes. When Nineveh fell in 612 BC, its place burned, yet the clay tablets hardened by fire survived, carrying Mesopotamia's voice into the future. The destruction of Nineveh did not end Mesopotamian civilization, it transformed it. From its intellectual and administrative foundations emerged a new imperial model under the Persians. In the 6th century BC, a Persian ruler named Cyrus the Great would unite the Medes and Persians into an empire unlike those before it. Rather than ruling through fear alone, Cyrus sought stability through cooperation, allowing conquered peoples to retain their customs, religions, and local institutions. Cyrus's approach to rule was recorded in what is known as the Cyrus Cylinder, a clay inscription discovered in Babylon. Written in cuneiform, it described the restoration of temples, the return of displaced peoples, and the protection of local traditions. Rather than erasing conquered cultures, Persian authorities sought legitimacy through preservation, presenting empire not as domination alone but as order restored. Among those affected by Cyrus's policies were the Hebrews, who had been exiled to Babylon decades earlier. Under Persian rule, they were permitted to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temples, an event preserved in biblical tradition, and remembered as a moment when imperial power intersected with religious restoration. Empire could not endure through force alone. It needed a voice understood across distance. Under Persian rule, Aramaic emerged as the language of administration, linking distant provinces through shared communication. In adopting a common tongue, the empire reduced the friction of diversity, proving that power was sustained not merely by armies but by understanding. Administrative unity required shared language, yet literacy itself remained limited to trained elites. This changed with the Phoenicians. Through commercial necessity, they developed a phonetic alphabet that reduced writing to a manageable set of signs, enabling broader participations in record keeping and exchange. The implication extended far beyond trade, shaping Greek, Hebrew, and eventually Latin scripts that underpinned many of the world's modern languages. If law gave civilization structure, and empire gave it scale, Phoenician gave it connection. Through maritime trade networks, they created an early system of globalization where communication mattered as much as conquest. Their alphabet traveled farther than any army, adapting to new peoples and languages, demonstrating that the most enduring power of civilization lay not in dominion, but in transmission, a legacy that would shape the written tradition of the Mediterranean world and beyond. Across the plains of Mesopotamia, humanity attempted something unprecedented: the organization of society beyond memory, tribe, or tradition alone. Cities rose, laws were carved into stone, empires stretched across continents, and knowledge was preserved in clay. For the first time, human communities learned to govern not merely through personal authority, but through systems designed to endure beyond individual lives. Yet the experiment revealed its own limits. Cities that mastered administration struggled with environmental strain, political instability, and the immense pressures of expansion. Empires rose rapidly and collapsed just as quickly, reminding their inhabitants that civilization required constant maintenance. Order once achieved could never remain permanent without renewal. Though kingdoms fell and capitals burned, the innovation of Mesopotamia endured. Writing outlived the scribes who first pressed symbols into clay. Law survived the kings who proclaimed it. Systems of administration and record keeping passed from one empire to the next, forming structures that future civilizations would inherit rather than invent anew. Mesopotamia did not perfect civilization, it discovered it. Between the Tigris and Euphrates, humanity conducted its first sustained experiment in organizing complexity, learning to preserve memory, regulate power, connect distant communities through shared systems. The cities themselves would fade, but the framework they created would remain, shaping how human societies would come to understand authority, order, and permanence in a world where nothing else remained.